Mr. Castleman, welcome to Stockholm.
We'll be providing you with anything you need.
Tell me this isn't some great big joke.
It's all real, darling. So way back in 2003, Meg Wollitzer's incredible novel called The Wife came out. And I read it, and I was blown away. Because what Meg does, she tells a story that is so subversive about what it is to be a female writer.
The Wife is a story of a long-time marriage built on youthful passion, ambition, and a great compromise, which comes crashing down many, many years later when the husband has become a world-renowned author and is awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature.
Hello, Ivan?
Hello, Mrs. Castleman. Is that you?
Yes.
Mr. Castleman, you're still on as well?
Yes, I am.
It is my great honor and pleasure to tell you, Mr. Castleman, that you have been chosen to receive this year's Nobel Prize in Literature.
And it's from the point of view of what it's like to be the wife of a great literary giant. And secretly, she knows that she's the one who has the true talent.
And really, I think Bjorn, the director, describes the film really well as an elastic band which stretches throughout the movie, and at the end it breaks when this big secret comes out, and the impact it has on Joe and Joan's family and all around them. And it's a fantastically gripping piece of cinema which we're all very proud of.
For me, it was a very personal story because when I was a kid, my mom, who is that generation that we see here in The Wife, she would always say to me, Claudia, remember one thing. The man is the hat, and you can't forget the man is the hat, and he makes the decisions. But you are, or the woman is the throat that turns the hat, and then the hat always looks where you want the hat to look at. At a certain point, I was like, what the hell? I want to make the decisions. I want to have a voice. I don't want to be just somebody, turning a hat so that that hat can look somewhere, right? And I think we come a long way. We need to find our voice as a woman, and this is what this movie is about.
And when Jane, who I knew many, many years ago because we developed another project together, came back into my life, The Wife was what I read, and it bothered me that the movie hadn't gotten made. And one of those weekends where you start thinking about, how am I going to do this? It suddenly struck me that because the film was largely set in Stockholm, where the Nobel Prize is awarded, that maybe I could partner with a Scandinavian producer.
I came on board the project once I was given the script to read, and I read it immediately, and I absolutely loved it, and I just knew I had to do this. And I thought that this was perfect for a Scandinavian co-production since it's set in Stockholm. So I brought on board a Swedish director, and we chose to work with Björn Runge because he is a great director who is very much into actors. He's the actor's director, and he's also working a lot on the theater. And I've seen his movies and absolutely loved them. And I thought he had the right sensitivity for this project, so I reached out to him.
And he became our director, and he just got the script. He loved it. He was passionate about it. He wrote these wonderful emails. And what we adored was he said, this is a movie for everybody. He didn't think of it as a kind of high-end specialty movie. He saw all the themes.
For me, what was familiar in the script was the chamber play that's actually there. A play between a mother and a father and a son. So it was something that I was familiar with. But what I was really attracted to was that it was set up on a Nobel Prize winner's stage. So it was a small story within a larger story.
And the way so many independent films are financed nowadays is getting a foreign sales agent to come on board, pre-sell international distribution rights. And in order to do that, you have to have a star. And Jane and I and Bjorn all agreed that Glenn Close would be absolutely perfect to play the wife, Joan Castleman. We gave Glenn the script, and fortunately, she loved it.
I have been an admirer of Jane Anderson's writing
for many years. So when I heard it was Jane, and then I read the novel, and I thought it was just a really, really intriguing premise.
Joni, get over here. Come.
Hello, Hal.
Hello, Joe. You're looking lovely as always.
Thank you, Hal. That's very sweet.
The New York Times is here.
Really?
Tell her. They're giving your husband the cover of the Sunday magazine. They're knocking out a story about Bill Clinton for him.
Meg Wolitzer basically gave me permission to just take the film and run with it. When you adapt a piece of literature to film, you have to make a couple of adjustments to make the narrative more dramatic. In the novel, the prize that the great Joe Castleman gets is an obscure prize in Helsinki, Finland. I chose to make it take place with the Nobel Prizes because that ups the stakes. I also added into the dramatic narrative the rather damaged adult son of Joe and Joan Castleman.
I think the biggest difference from the novel to the script is that Jane Anderson, the scriptwriter, has given the son, David, a more important position in the script. And that I think it's genial.
One would think that you would need a female director to bring out all the subtleties of that. Bjorn, I call the most feminist of male directors. He has a beautiful, sensitive sensibility, and he absolutely understands what the script is trying to say.
Because he's one of those few directors who has his main focus on the core of a film, which is, in my view, the actors and the interrelationship between the characters. And he has been working a lot on theater, and he took that knowledge from the theater into the movie making. So he's very much an actor's director, and he has a huge sensibility for small little details in a face. And I often, when in the casting process, he often talked about, I like her eyes, or I like his face. And he always wanted to meet people in person more than seeing a casting tape. So he works a bit differently and very instinctively. What makes it all work is that huge sensitivity he has.
I think Bjorn flew himself to New York, met with Glenn, and Glenn made the commitment to come on board.
Glenn Close cast me, actually, and then I cast the rest.
I love the way he works. I think it's a kind of a perfect melding of his theater and film kind of knowledge. He has a really kind of wonderful understanding of the acting process, and gives you time, especially if it's a difficult scene. And the way he sets up shots give you time, and the wonderful way he covers things. It's not a lot of different shots. It's just he and Ulf work incredibly well together. So I feel like we've been kind of almost a little theater company in this movie.
She's got sense for acting in front of the camera, but she has also good sense for where the character is in the script. Some things happen as soon as she is sitting and we're looking for how the light is, but she's in the character in a way that I never experienced. She knows what the character should give the audience, what kind of emotions. She's so skillful. I never experienced anything like this.
In addition to the wonderful Glenn Close, we were lucky to get Jonathan Pryce to play Joe Castleman, who is actually a Brooklyn Jewish working class writer. And Jonathan, who is such a magnificent actor, immediately lapsed into his Joe Castleman accent. And we have Christian Slater playing a little bit too nosy journalist, Nathaniel Bone, as well as Max Irons, who's playing David Castleman, son of Joe and Joan.
I wouldn't miss your award for anything. It's truly an astounding achievement, Joe.
Not about the prize, Nathaniel. It's about getting up the gumption to write the next book.
Absolutely. Well, that is why you are who you are. May I also say congratulations to you as well, Joan? I don't think people give the spouse enough credit.
I'll give my wife credit. I give her plenty of credit.
That's not what I meant. I meant the rest of the world, the critics, the readers, and most of all...
Nathaniel, I know I'm supposed to be impressed that somehow you've wheedled your way onto this flight, but I'm telling you, I am not giving you permission to write my biography. Now, would you please leave us alone?
Made that abundantly clear.
Fine,
I'm
good.
So sorry. I just wanted to say congratulations.
Okay.
Thank you for coming by and saying hello today.
I mean it sincerely. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, David, how's the writing going?
Move on, Nathaniel.
Part of my attraction to the script was knowing that Bjorn was going to be directing it. And so I looked at, there's one of his films I specifically looked at. I think it's the only one with English subtitles. And I liked his work, and I liked the fact that it was a film about, again, about relationships. I was looking forward to the fact that it had this kind of Swedish or Nordic slant.
To work with Jonathan Pryce is also a great experience, and for me, a true privilege. A scene where Jonathan Pryce is going to wake up in the bed, and he does it in a way you can imagine what he was dreaming about, and that's very strange. So when he wakes up, I just ask him, she's coming into the room and she wakes you because you're a little bit late. And then when we shoot it and he wakes up, you can see on his eyes that he has had a strange dream. And I didn't ask for that, but he's given us that. I think what's so fantastic to work with both Glenn and Jonathan is that they are a perfect couple. They are in one way made as an actor to work together. I think they give and take energy from each other in a fantastic good way, and they're very experienced. Small details is a starting point for their acting, and then as soon as they know exact how the details looks in the room for them, they can go into the deep emotions of the scene. So it's very interesting to see how they try to make this ordinary word logical for them in a strange location. And as soon as they have done that, they can go in for a meeting between two souls that are wrestling with their destiny. That's what this film is about.
Glenn was in first, so I always knew she was going to be playing that role. I've always liked her as an actor. I think what's good is that, I mean, we're both the same age, and there's, we can both draw on very similar life experiences for things, long relationships, and there's not a lot that has to be said between us, which again I like very much. We both understand the needs of the characters and the film. It's really good to work with someone who is that dedicated to their work and that intense about their work.
It's been wonderful working with Jonathan. Again, I remember him in Brazil, all those years ago, and I've never forgotten that performance. And, he's just one of the greats. He's one of his generation. And so it's a huge thrill and an honor to be working with him. And I just happened to see one of his final performances of Merchant of Venice. He was playing Shylock, and it just was, I'll never forget it. It was one of those performances that was kind of, changed your molecules a little bit.
When I was searching for actors for cast the David character, the son in the family, I really searched for someone that was fragile and vulnerable, but also could have a sort of hard side. The father, the Joe Custerman, he's a little bit afraid for his son, David. And for me, it was important to find someone, an actor with that combination of different emotions, both the poetic side and the brutal side. And for me, Max Irons is right there.
Bjorn is just the greatest director to work with. He's the sort of director that you dream of working with as an actor. He's so precise. He's so relaxed. He talks in a language we all understand. We finish early every day, which is unheard of. He's economical with the way he shoots and the way he directs. And he's got so much heart and such a good emotional intelligence, which is precisely what you need for a film like this. He's kind of perfect, and I think he's a bit of a hero on set.
Wow, I was really excited to get the opportunity to work with Bjorn. I'd seen some of his previous films and was just a huge huge fan. I think he's great with character stories and really is just wonderful at creating very rich and very deep, thorough characters. And after reading this script, I felt like this was something that was right in his wheelhouse and something he'd be able to tackle beautifully.
Christian Slater was really wild to work with because he's got a sort of energy that he must start. He starts in one way like a tree that the wind is blowing through. You know, it can be very, very much energy that goes to one way to another way, but it can also be very specific. So from that wild energy, I can ask him to, when you come into that line, I want you to be very, very specific. It's no problem for him.
I mean, I've been in this business now for 40 years, believe it or not. And the more I continue to do it, the more I realize that it is about an actress's ability to play and to move around within a scene, and especially in film, to be able to try all kinds of different things and give the editor as much material, for the editing room. And Christian and I had these 3 scenes where basically he's interviewing me in a pub. It was great. It was great play. We were able to try a lot of different things, and he brings a totally different energy to this. So that's kind of great.
The majority of the things that I have to do in this film are with Glenn Close. She and I have a we play sort of an interesting chess game, metaphorically, the two of us, and I'm trying to get her to tell me the truth, and she keeps me at bay. So it's definitely a very nice push and pull sort of relationship, and she's definitely an actress that I have admired my entire career, somebody I've grown up and watched, and I've never had the opportunity to work with before. And when this opportunity came around, I was more than ecstatic to get that chance.
The movie actually takes place in 2 different time periods. So we have the younger versions of Joe and Joan Castleman being played by Harry Lloyd and Annie Stark.
You're talented, I hear.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I love to write. It's my life.
Don't do it.
Excuse me.
Don't ever think that you can get their attention.
Whose?
The men who write the reviews, who run the publishing houses, who edit the magazines. The ones who decide who gets to be taken seriously, who gets to be put up on a pedestal for the rest of their lives.
A writer has to write.
A writer has to be read, honey.
I came to The Wife for several reasons. I am a huge fan of Jane Anderson, have been for quite some time, and I also really love Bjorn and his work. And it was just such a beautifully written script about, about marriage and just such an interesting relationship between 2 people.
I just thought it was a really original story. I didn't know at all where it was going, and I was fascinated in the relationship between Joan and Joe. I thought it was a really well-observed portrait of a really interesting, different kind of relationship.
It's interesting to think that another actor is going to play your younger self, and in some ways it's quite liberating because you don't have to tell all your story yourself. A lot of your story as the older Joe, all the groundwork is done by Harry, and so the audience can say, oh, it's interesting how that man developed.
I knew Jonathan a little bit before, and actually both of us were working in the theatre before this. So he came and saw the play I was doing, I came and saw him, and we chatted afterwards, and even up here and with Bjorn, we were talking a bit about kind of accent, which I think kind of changes actually quite a lot from when he's a young man to when he's a bit older. So there are lots of similarities, and we talked a lot about the differences as well. And Bjorn, from the beginning, said something I thought was really interesting, which is how, in a way, the older Joe is more of a baby than the younger Joe.
I think it's a real interesting perspective on a relationship between 2 people that, are very complicated and complex themselves, but their powerful love for each other not only creates, beautiful stories, but I think, truly affects their lives in ways you can't even imagine. So I think it's just a really interesting perspective on 2 people's relationships.
Where have you been? I've been worried sick about you.
Why? It's only 4:30.
Yeah, but look how dark it is already. Don't do this to me. Don't disappear on me like this.
I didn't disappear. I went out for a couple of hours.
What have you been doing all day?
I I walked around, went into a couple of stores, looked in a couple of shops. How did the rehearsal go?
Tori, you've been smoking. I can smell it.
I went into a cafe and it was filled with smoke. Ugh.
You've been drinking too.
Yeah, I had a vodka.
In the middle of the day?
Yes, Joe, in the middle of the day.
You know, Johnny, you can't be doing this. You can't be showing up at functions with alcohol on your breath.
You are the star of the big show, so why would anyone possibly care?
What the hell has gotten into you?
I don't like to be lectured to. I'm not a child.
Kind of known for women who are in control of their lives or seeming control of their lives. I don't think Jo necessarily is. I don't think she's comfortable in social situations, so she's very different from what I've played.
The character of Joan Castleman is a deeply intelligent, contained, and shy woman who has taken the back seat to her brilliant husband. Who better to play that kind of role and to give it all the texture and all the subtext that you need than someone like Glenn Close, who is just very naturally an elegant, wickedly smart actress.
Our sales agent brought to the party a company called Silver Reel, who also loved the script and came in for the additional financing and subject to our being able to shoot the film in Glasgow.
Our experience there is really, really good, you know, in terms of the crews you get, the support we get over there. We really love it there.
And things like that, so it would show up very white.
Yes, that would be great.
Without actually...
You always look for where can yield the most production value. And actually, Glasgow has got it all. It's got 2 massive venues which double for the Nobel Prize ceremony in Stockholm. And it's got a Concorde, which is great. The film is set in the mid-90s, and Concorde was obviously iconically within that time period, so that worked really well for us. That's a nice surprise.
So I think has been absolutely marvelous here. Not only because the crew is very good, not only because the locations is very fine, but also the circumstances around this production has been, for me, amazing.
Well, filming of The Wife, what's interesting about it is there are no locations actually in the UK or Scotland, but we are filming the bulk of the film in and around Glasgow, and that's been a sort of exciting challenge, to be honest. We've had to recreate New York in the 50s, Connecticut in the 90s, Connecticut in the 60s, I think, and Sweden, Stockholm in the 90s. Just I had to think about that there, but yeah, Sweden in the 90s. And it's been a fantastic challenge, and I hope we've achieved it.
Well, one of the nice challenges there are when working on a period film is doing the research. That's always really interesting, and this has been particularly interesting because I was researching more than one country, and it's very often the case that you find what was being worn in America or what was being worn in Britain is not the same as was being worn in Stockholm in the 90s.
Probably the most challenging bits would be trying to marry in the 1950s section with the younger characters. So finding their looks and making sure that we believe they're the people who we see later. Their looks change quite quickly, so we had to be certain of what we were doing and that we were jumping through the periods correctly.
The challenges for doing period work are about authenticity, I suppose. You have a puzzle to solve, and one is how much are you influenced by reality and the recreation of a period, and how much do you look at it, explore it, and then kind of make it your own. And I think that we've done both here. At times we've tried to absolutely replicate certain things, and at other times we've just taken it as a guide.
A contemporary eye doesn't find the early 1990s as attractive as we all thought it was in the early 1990s.
So, while I was out being a drunken lush, you were seducing the luscious Linnea?
Nothing happened.
Oh, don't you dare insult my intelligence, don't you dare.
Very emotional film with a big heart, that you can smell the changing of people trying to find their way in their lives. That's for me a sort of miracle when you see actors that in one way show you as an audience their heart.
Tell me about yourself, Mrs. Castleman.
Do you have an occupation?
I do.
And what is that?
I am a kingmaker.
You know, my wife will tell you the same thing.
I think the basic dynamic between Joe and Joan and what their life has become since you see them when they're young. And it's very complex.
It's serious, but not too serious. And it's the kind of film I would enjoy going to see. I think that's one of the things that attracted me to it in the first place.
Well, hopefully it'll resonate and people will find strands and character traits that they'll relate to and just be really submerged into a story. And I think that's really the best use of cinema, when you're completely in there with a character.
Those kinds of movies are really not being financed by the studios any longer. So you have to go out and try and figure out, by getting the right director, the right cast, and then the finance, to put those movies together.
I think there will be many long married couples and newly married couples that will look at this film and say, could we possibly sustain the kind of secret that Joe and Joan Castleman sustained for 40 years?
It's a very unusual story and a very unique story, and I think the performances of Glenn Close and Jonathan Pryce, their relationship, their chemistry is very powerful, and that whole relationship, and I think it's one that people will certainly be able to identify with and relate to.
I can't do it. I can't take it. I can't take the humiliation.
There is nothing shameful about what we do.
Please don't paint me as a victim. I am much more interesting than that.
I think you are sick and tired of being invisible.
Without this woman, I am nothing.
I'm going to tell you